You are watching WION World is One. This is Gravitas. I'm Molly Gambhir. Is Israel's pullout from Gaza's Khan Younis aimed at recuperation or restructuring? Just have a look at what Israel has been up to over the weekend. It closed its embassies in at least 28 countries around the world. Leave for combat units was cancelled. GPS navigation services were blocked. Air Defense Command was amplified. Bomb shelters were opened and more troops were placed at its borders. Clearly, something is brewing. What is all this in preparation of? America is confused. Washington does not know what Israel is up to. Israel says it is for rest and recuperation of its troops so they can be better prepared for future operations, including the planned Rafah offensive. But is it really meant for rest and recuperation? Or is there more to this than meets the eye? Perhaps a possible new front in the war? Let's just understand the possibilities of Israel's move. Possibility number one, Israel is speaking the truth. It has withdrawn its 98th Division to prepare for future missions. Announcing its decision on Sunday, the IDF said that its 98th Division had concluded its mission in Khan Younis.
The forces are exiting and preparing for their next missions.
But then just how many Israeli troops have been pulled out remains unclear. Earlier on Sunday, the IDF army vehicles were seen heading to one of its bases in southern Israel. Apparently, they have left just one brigade there. The one brigade, named Nahal, remains in central Gaza, splitting the Palestinian Strip in two and preventing the return of civilians from south to north of Gaza. You see, since the start of the year, the Israeli military has been reducing numbers in Gaza to relieve reservists. So this fits what Israel has been telling the world. But then by Sunday evening, the IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, told a press conference that the military operation against Hamas is far from over, despite the withdrawal of soldiers. Which brings me to possibility number two. Israeli forces left southern Gaza to finally launch the Rafah offensive. We know that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted that the Rafah operation is imminent despite the international condemnation this plan has drawn. Israel, in fact, has said an incursion into Rafah is important to achieve its goal of eliminating Hamas from Gaza. Israel says that 4 battalions of Hamas fighters are stationed in Rafah. On Sunday, the IDF Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi said that the military is far from stopping its operations in the Gaza Strip. Following the withdrawal, Israel is adamant about its Rafah plan despite America being dead set against it. You see, Rafah sits in the southernmost part of Gaza and has become a shelter for hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians. It had been designated as a safe zone for civilians, in fact, fleeing the widespread destruction in the densely inhabited areas further north. At least 1.7 million Palestinians have been displaced as a result of the war. The entire population is at risk of famine. Back in February, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that an assault on Rafah would put the final nail in the coffin of humanitarian aid operations, leaving Gazans without support. And then last week, Israeli forces admitted to killing 7 aid workers, calling it an operational error. The US and other Western allies have repeatedly called on Israel not to launch an all-out attack on Rafah. It is the last remaining area that has not come under the control of the IDF. All signs indicate that Israel is preparing for the Rafah offensive. But these are obvious signs. Does it mean they are real enough, or is it something Israel wants us to believe? Because if it was us reading the tea leaves, we would say something else is brewing here altogether. Which brings me to possibility number 3. Israel pulled the troops from Gaza in preparation for a possible new front in the war. Like I mentioned earlier, Israel has shut its diplomatic missions and embassies in 28 countries around the world. Not just that, the country is in a state of heightened alert. What do you think Israel fears? Let me tell you. Israel fears retaliation, revenge from Iran. You see, last week, suspected Israeli warplanes bombed Iran's embassy in the Syrian capital of Damascus. The strike killed top Iranian military commander and marked a major escalation in Israel's war with its regional adversaries. How exactly? Israel has struck Iran-linked assets in Syria many times, but this was the first time that Israel carried out an attack on Iran's diplomatic building. In the aftermath, Iran naturally vowed revenge. Tehran said it reserves the right to take a decisive response and will deliver a slap to Israel. Israel has been on alert since then. It has cancelled home leave for combat troops, called up reserves, bolstered air defenses. And today, the Israeli defense chief has declared that the country is prepared to handle any Iran scenario.
The IDF knows how to deal with Iran, offensively and defensively. We are prepared for this. We have good defensive systems and we know how to act forcefully against Iran in both near and distant places. We are operating in cooperation with the United States and strategic partners in the region.
The Iran-Israel shadow war has put the US on high alert as well. President Joe Biden reportedly dialed the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, assuring him of America's support. But just hours after the Biden call became public, Iran issued a warning to the US to stay out of the conflict. In a written message, Tehran warned the US not to get dragged into Netanyahu's trap. Clearly, the regional hostilities have spread, and so far, Israel was fighting the so-called proxies of Iran in the form of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. And now, as tensions escalate, is an all-out war between Israel and Iran imminent? And is that why Israel pulled its troops from Gaza, to prepare for another front? In fact, Iran is not mincing words. It has issued a fresh warning to Israel. The message is absolutely clear, and it has been delivered by the Iranian news agency through an infographic it listed out. Iran's many missiles that are capable of reaching Israel. Just look at where the two countries are on the map first. This is Iran, and this is Israel. The two countries are around 1.7 thousand kilometers away. Between them are Iraq and Jordan. Iran claims it has not one but two, not two but 9 missiles that can reach Israel. Which are these missiles? One, Sejil. Its range is 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers. It has a speed of anywhere between 12 to 14 Mach. 2, Khorram Sheher. It has a range of 2,000 kilometers. Khorram Sheher 4. Its speed is between 8 and 16 Mach. 3, Emad, its range of 2,000 kilometers, speed 7.2. Shahab 3, it has a range of 2,000 kilometers and a speed of Mach 7. 5, Qadr, its range is around 1.9 thousand kilometers, and this missile travels at the speed of Mach 9. Here are the other missiles: Paveh, Khabeshakan, Fatah 2, and Haj Qasem. These are all Iranian-made missiles. And by showing them off, Iran is basically sending out a message to Israel. We are ready for war, and we are capable of hitting you, Israel. And just note the timing as well. It comes after a drone strike in the Iranian consulate in Damascus. It happened last Monday. 11 people were killed. Among them were 7 members of the IRGC, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. There were 2 senior commanders, including the commander responsible for overseeing the operation of the Quds Force in Lebanon and Syria. The Quds Force, by the way, is the IRGC's foreign relations arm. The commander in charge was a man named Mohammad Reza Zahedi. He became Iran's highest-ranking official to be killed since the assassination of the Quds Force chief, Qasem Soleimani, in the year 2020. Iran has vowed to avenge the attack, with its ambassador to Syria saying that Iran's response to the strike would be, quote-unquote, at the same magnitude and harshness. Iran's Joint Chief of Staff, Mohammad Bagheri, told a group of mourners that Iran will decide how and when to attack Israel. The time, type, plan of the operation will be decided by us in a way that makes Israel regret what it did. Obviously, Israel has not formally acknowledged its involvement in the drone strike. It has not issued a denial either. On Sunday, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said that Israel is ready for, quote-unquote, any situation that may develop vis-a-vis Iran. What kind of retaliation are we really looking at? Will there be a direct face-off, or will Iran use its militia? You see, Iran very much has the option of using one of its proxies, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example, or the Houthis in Yemen. In fact, the Hezbollah leadership recently said, and I'm quoting here, "Be certain that the Iranian response regarding the issue of the Iranian consulate will inevitably come. The foolishness that was committed by Netanyahu concerning the attack on the Iranian consulate will open the door to resolution of this battle," quote unquote. Attacks at sea also have gone up since the Damascus drone strike on the 1st of April. The Houthis claim they have attacked 2 Israeli vessels that were heading into Israeli ports. The group also claims to have attacked a British ship. The U.S. Central Command claims to have shot down an unmanned aerial vehicle. Will the Iran-Israel face-off play out at sea, or will it be land? This is the Yahya Rahim Safavi. He is one of the senior advisors to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And here's what he said over the weekend. The embassies of the Zionist regime are no longer safe. The question is Iran planning a tit-for-tat attack? Will Iran target Israeli embassies? Israel has temporarily closed 28 of its embassies around the world. An indirect face-off between Iran and Israel is something that the region has dreaded for a while now. Many West Asia watchers have been warning that the Damascus drone strike could have been that turning point that many could have seen coming, but no one really needed. So the big question here really is, what next? Are the Israeli preparations aimed at a possible war with Iran? And what happens if the two sides do go to war? Here's a rough comparison of the two militaries. The Israeli Defense Force has around 170,000 troops plus 465,000 reservists. Iran's IRGC has 230,000 troops plus 350,000 reservists. Israel is West Asia's most battle-hardened military, in fact, having fought many wars. But the IDF is currently spread thin in Gaza. Iranian troops also have combat experience, having in the past gone to war with Iraq. Iran and Israel have been fighting proxy wars for years, but there has not been any direct confrontation yet. Is it now only a matter of time? It's past 9 PM IST and the once-in-a-lifetime solar eclipse has just begun. It's another 52 minutes till you can see the total sun covered. A phenomenon that will not be visible to people living outside North America. Nonetheless, WION will be getting you the live updates from this celestial event. And we are getting live visuals at this point from North America, where people have gathered to view the celestial spectacle, the total solar eclipse. Millions of people, of course, around the world have their eyes on the sky right now. A rare total solar eclipse shadowing North America. To witness one of the biggest celestial phenomena, people have gathered across the US, Mexico, Canada. They are gathering in places along what is called the path of totality, which basically means cities, paths that fall along this path will see the moon fully obscure the sun. They will see a dark afternoon for a few minutes. And if the weather permits, people in cities like Austin, Dallas, Mexico as well, will be able to see the solar eclipse. For the cities outside the path of totality, a partial eclipse will be visible.
It's pretty much a once-in-a-lifetime experience to see an eclipse close up, especially at Niagara Falls. I don't think another good one will be for decades, and even though we're pretty far from home right now, this is still in driving distance.
And for some, this phenomenon is cause for celebration. Just take the example of this young couple. They say that they have traveled from California to join the watch party at Niagara Falls with a plan to get engaged by the falls. Take a look.
Their fun additional thing is that a little bit later there might be a little bit of a surprise going on that we're pretty excited about. So yeah. Big moment for us, definitely.
Yeah.
Big moment indeed. And there are some people, by the way, who chase that big moment, even if it means traveling around the world. Take Leticia Ferrer, for example. She is 63 years old. She lives in North Texas, and she has witnessed 20 total solar eclipses around the world.
I've seen 20 all over the world. All 7 continents. Who knows those 7 continents? Yay! Did you know there were 6 oceans? I've seen 6 oceans too.
Now, at any other time, the beaches of Mexico are full of tourists. Today, the seaside city of Mazatlan in Mexico is a hive of activity. Both locals and tourists have come to the shorelines. Across the city, one can see banners advertising the astronomical event.
Antes estaba relacionado con desastres, con destrucciones. Ahorita no, ahorita es un fenómeno que pues, nos habla de la hermosura, yo lo puedo decir así, de la hermosura de la creación, de la hermosura de los astros. Entonces, no hay que temer. En torno a los eclipses ha habido muchas mitologías, ha habido muchas situaciones que nos han alarmado. Y no, pues si fuera así, pues no hubiese tanta gente ahorita en Mazatlán que viene a presenciarlo.
In fact, some are also praying that the eclipse will be good for business. The local fishermen hoping that the eclipse will bring good ocean currents so that they can catch a lot of fish and lobsters.
Va a estar bien la pesca porque se mueve el mar. Cuando se mueve el mar es cuando fluye las corrientes y las corrientes meten pescado, langosta, todo eso meten. Ojalá sean corrientes buenas también, porque hay corrientes que no meten nada de pescado. Hay a veces que no hay nada de pescado. Ojalá con el eclipse sean corrientes buenas para poder agarrar pescadito, langosta, todo eso.
And astrologers who look to the stars for answers to many of life's questions believe that people are impacted by the alignment of the sun, the moon and planet Earth. And since this rare celestial phenomenon is happening in an election year, here's what they have to say about the upcoming election in the US.
Trump's chart, the eclipse, not surprisingly, falls into the 9th house. 9th house is legalities. He has a bevy of legal issues right now. And it's eclipsed, so he doesn't have the full clarity. He's basically in the dark. And what's really interesting is Mercury is retrograde. So maybe one of these gag orders could stick. We'll see. And then the ruler of this eclipse is in his 8th house. 8th house, he needs money. 8th house is finances, 8th house is dead.
But some astrologers say that the eclipse is not going to be bringing in gloom. Rather, we should see this eclipse as an opportunity to become more emotionally self-aware.
There are tons of upsides to this eclipse. Now, on a personal level, the solar eclipse in Aries is an opportunity to become more emotionally self-aware as we deal with feelings that we usually push aside. Anger, irritation, ambition, passion, egoism, right? So we can come into greater self-awareness, greater consciousness, and that is a meaningful step towards becoming more whole, more aligned, and using our agency in ways that help us to become the kind of person we want to be in our lives and in the world.
And let's now go straight to our correspondents, Susan Teherani and Siddharth MP, with us on the broadcast, taking us through the minute-by-minute developments. The moment is finally here. A lot of anticipation in the air, of course, in the run-up to the total solar eclipse. Let me come straight to you first, Susan. Give us a sense of what things are looking like and what the people around you have also been sharing with you in terms of the preparations that they have made to witness this celestial event.
Hi, Molly. I'm standing in the middle of New York City's Central Park, and in just a matter of hours, this field behind me that doesn't have an obstructed view of the sky will be full of New Yorkers and tourists hoping to get a glimpse of that 90% eclipse that we're going to witness here in New York City. We do know that up by Niagara Falls, hotel reservations are completely booked. People have been traveling up there, and then the Buffalo area in New York as well, days in advance. But here in New York City, not only will people go to their local parks, but like I mentioned, they really want to come to places that they have a wide view, like this field behind me. These glasses are very important. There has been constant warnings about wearing these eclipse glasses that have been authorized by NASA. Of course, some school children in the past had learned how to make eclipse glasses with cereal boxes and whatnot. But if there's one commodity that's in high demand right now in New York City, is these special glasses to get a glimpse of that eclipse. Of course, the governor has said to be very mindful because there may be a lot of car accidents during this time, considering the fact that not only people want to get to where they want to watch the eclipse, but also while they're driving, they might want to get a sort of peek of that eclipse. Airports may have delays as well, but we are expected to see a lot of traffic and congestion. But nonetheless, I have my glasses ready. If I put them on right now, I don't think I'll be able to see anything I can't. But when I look up in the sun, surely enough, it's there and we're waiting.
Waiting indeed. Let me also bring in Siddharth MP onto the conversation. Hi, Siddharth. A lot of talk also about the Aditya L1 mission and how it will be tracking and studying the sun's behavior during this solar eclipse. What more can you tell us about that?
So, hi, Molly. Let me start by telling you that India per se as a country, anywhere in the geography of the Indian subcontinent or in Asia for that matter, where it's night, it's not possible to see the solar eclipse. It's always this way that only the parts of the earth that have daytime can witness it, and that too only along the track that the moon is actually visible and moon is actually blocking the sun. But what we have to remember is that for the last several months, it's been a complete end-to-end solar eclipse, or 24/7 solar eclipse for India's Aditya L1 spacecraft, which is at a vantage point almost 1.5 million kilometers from the Earth. From there, in fact, Aditya uses a very special equipment that is called a coronagraph. They call it a visible emission line coronagraph. So only when the moon completely blocks the sun, the eclipse happens, right? But this is a natural phenomenon. But how do you simulate it? How do you sort of artificially perform it? That is what this coronagraph does. It actually completely blocks out the sun's light and only ensures that the outermost layer of the sun or the sun's atmosphere, known as corona, is visible. So using that, the sun's corona is studied using this particular equipment. So even today, the sun's corona is something that will be visible for a couple of minutes when this complete eclipse happens. And in the US, people will be photographing it and observing it. But we have to remember, for the last several months, India's Aditya L1 spacecraft, daily, minute by minute, has been studying the sun's corona, eclipse or no eclipse, because this special equipment on board Aditya can ensure that it is a complete eclipse view, even when there is no solar eclipse happening. So that's the beauty about Indian space science and technology. In fact, even NASA and the European Space Agency have, done missions to study the sun. So this is in that regard. And let's also remember the fact that studying the sun's corona is very important, because the corona is where, a lot of high energy particles are emitted from the sun. And when they come to the earth, there is also the danger that they can disrupt high tension power lines. In the past, it has happened in Canada and in Zurich. And also, these can also damage satellites that are orbiting the earth, which is why it's extremely important to study the sun's corona. The sun's coronal studies can be done only during an eclipse. Right. But obviously, eclipses happen once in a couple of years, and the eclipse happens only for a few minutes or a couple of hours. So at that time, the observation is very limited, which is why space agencies send missions to the Lagrangian point. And then from there, they get an unobstructed 24/7 view of the sun. For several years from now, Aditya will be studying the sun's corona as though there is an eclipse non-stop. So that's the significance of the Aditya L1 craft.
Which is why it's all the more important to make the most of the duration as far as this total solar eclipse is concerned. We already have those visuals of those large number of people who have gathered to witness that event for themselves. It's been called a once-in-a-lifetime celestial spectacle. Going back across to Susan, who's been getting us those updates from New York. Susan, we have already talked about the path of totality. We've also been getting our viewers the reactions coming in from different quarters. Astrologers weighing in on what this means for the U.S. in an election year, for example. Also, a lot of beliefs, myths, superstitions, perhaps, that are associated with a solar eclipse. So if you can just share with us some of the recommendations that have been made and some of those myths that have been busted as well.
Yeah, social media is just the perfect environment these days for not only astrological predictions, but also really trying to sew things together and make sense of everything. I'll give you an example. Now, this does not mean that we're endorsing it or it's valid in any sense, but one clip that went viral was where some astrologers and also regular people were saying just on Friday, we had a 4.8 earthquake here in New York City, and lo and behold, on April 8th, which is 4/8, we have an eclipse. So anything can go. We have to be careful. A lot of advice on basically don't make big decisions, or others say that absolutely this is a time of clarity. So yeah, as you mentioned, there is a lot going on right now. There are, some aspects that we can really take note that in detail. And that's the fact that back in 2017, we saw an eclipse here in the United States. And that was interesting. But what makes this one interesting in 2024 is the sun was, first of all, a lot calmer in 2017, but in 2024, this year, the sun has a lot more rays, and while we're looking, if we're lucky, we even see some sparks and maybe some kind of flame and explosion as well. So those are the things that have been sort of correlated by some that something major is going to happen during this time, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that if anything major does happen, it's for the good, of course. Yeah.
We're leaving it there for the moment. Susan and Siddharth, thanks very much for joining us with those updates. As we've been telling you, anticipation has been building up, and now is the moment. And as the solar eclipse moves towards totality, let me also show you what else we have lined up for you on the show tonight. An engine cover fell off a Boeing plane mid-air. 135 passengers were on board. The plane was cruising at 10,300 feet. In South Africa, sacrificing wildlife to draw in more tourists, that's the question that's being asked. In fact, a new bill proposes legalizing the trade of rhino horn powder within the country. Is loneliness killing you? Are you set? As you set your weekly goal this Monday, we tell you why addressing loneliness should be on your priority list. Will the Ukraine war turn into a nuclear war? Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, this question has been asked time and again. There have been provocations, attacks and retaliation, claims and counterclaims, and a series of warnings. In fact, Russia has issued a fresh one now. It comes from the Russian ambassador to Finland, Pavel Kuznetsov. In an interview with the state-run agency TASS, the ambassador issued a stern warning. He said that Russia will definitely retaliate if NATO's nuclear weapons are deployed on Finnish soil. Let me first tell you more about what he said. I'm quoting. Of course, we cannot but respond to potential decisions by the Finnish government in this sphere. Specific steps will be developed depending on real threats that these actions will pose to our security. And talking about the potential deployment of NATO nukes on Finnish soil, he said, and I'm quoting further, the Finns cannot but realize that such a major provocation will not be left without a Russian response. However, we expect that common sense would prevail. Not just that, the ambassador also said that the relationship between Russia and Finland cannot go back to the way it used to be, at least for now. Now, here's a quick backgrounder. Let me take you back to April 2023. That's when Finland formally became a member of the NATO. This was more than just an addition to the military alliance. You see, Finland joining the NATO was significant for multiple reasons. Sweden and Finland applied to join the military alliance in May 2022. This was, of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine. And one of the biggest reasons why this was a huge move was that for decades, these two countries had been neutral. And Russia back then called the addition a dangerous historic mistake that would force Moscow to take countermeasures. In fact, the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, back then said that Finland joining the NATO raised the prospect of the conflict in Ukraine escalating further. The Kremlin spokesman, meanwhile, that time said, Dmitry Peskov, saying that Moscow would watch closely for any NATO military deployments in Finland. And as for NATO, the Secretary General then had said that Russia invaded Ukraine over the eastward expansion of NATO and that in reality the invasion triggered what Russia was supposedly fearing. For Finland, it was the beginning of a new era. Now, cut to 2024. Just last month, the Russian President Vladimir Putin called Finland's addition to the NATO a senseless step that made him send weapons to the border. And in the latest, the Russian ambassador to Finland has some tough words. What if nuclear weapons were placed on Finnish soil? How would Russia retaliate? And what would that mean for the situation on the ground? Would that turn this war into a nuclear war? You see, NATO members also have to provide military aid to other members if there is an attack, which basically means that if Russia takes action against, say, Finland, Russia risks a bigger conflict. And that is the last thing the world needs right now. With the Israel-Hamas war already increasingly showing signs of turning into a wider war, like we just told you, here's hoping common sense will prevail. I don't remember the last time we managed to get through a week without reporting on Boeing's faulty planes. It's just Monday and Boeing is back to 9 p.m. news with mid-air mishaps. Things are coming apart once again. It began with a plug door, then a tire, a part of the fuselage, then disappeared mid-air. And now we have an engine cowling coming off. It fell off a Boeing 737 plane during takeoff. What is an engine cowling first? It is a part that covers the plane's engine. On the 7th of April, the engine cowling of a Southwest flight came apart mid-air. It collided with the wing flap of the aircraft. The moment was captured by some terrified passengers aboard. Take a look.
Flight present heading. Do you need to run checklist? Yeah, we're going to need some time. For now, everything's okay. And we don't even know the nature of it, but apparently several passengers and flight attendants heard something loud hit the wing. So we're just going to take our time, get set up, and be ready to go. Thank you. Alpha 3695, no problem. You can expect vector.
In fact, reports quoted a passenger as saying, people in the exit row started yelling at the flight attendants and showing them the damage. We turned around and made a full-speed landing. Southwest Flight 3695 left Denver International Airport at 7:49 a.m. local time. It was supposed to head to Houston. There were 135 passengers and 6 crew members on board. The plane had climbed to about 10,300 feet. It had to turn around and return to Denver 25 minutes after taking off. After the plane made an emergency landing, it had to be towed to the gate. America's Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, is now investigating the incident. What has Southwest said? The airline said it would review the jet, adding that it was responsible for the maintenance of such parts. Sure, but the big question here is, why do incidents like these keep happening to Boeing planes? The American plane maker started the year with a mid-air scare. On the 5th of January, a door panel blew out mid-air. It was a new 737 MAX plane operated by Alaska Airlines. When the incident happened, the plane was cruising at 16,000 feet.
This wasn't even the emergency door. We're at the end of the plane, so the emergency door's right there. It was just a piece of the plane.
Now, thankfully, no one was injured. Following the Alaska airline incident, 200 737 MAX 9 planes were grounded in the U.S. Inspections were conducted in India as well, in fact. Parts were found missing from Boeing's 737 MAX planes. Airlines like Alaska and United also reported concerns. Few weeks ago, the CEO, Dave Calhoun, then announced he would be stepping down by the year end. In his letter, Boeing CEO Calhoun called the Alaska Airlines 1282 accident a quote-unquote watershed moment for Boeing, adding that we must continue to respond to this accident with humility and complete transparency. We also must inculcate a total commitment to safety and quality at every level of our company. Just last week, we learned that Boeing paid $160 million to Alaska Air as compensation for the losses that the airline suffered as a result of the grounding of the fleet. We also learned that earlier this year, Boeing's outgoing CEO gave up a $2.8 million bonus on the heels of the Alaska Air incident. But to what end? I mean, while these financial compensation sacrifices may seem generous to some, how is either of that guaranteeing passenger safety? It's not. My point here is very simple. This is a story about passenger safety. Every week, we are forced to come face to face with the safety problem with Boeing planes. Every day, millions of people fly Boeing planes. At any moment, at this very moment, some 500,000 people are estimated to be in the air on a plane. Many are flying Boeing planes. Where is the guarantee that these passengers are safe? No one was injured in the Southwest incident, thankfully. It was a closed shave, much like the other Boeing disasters this year. In March, a tire of a Boeing plane fell off mid-air. There were 235 passengers, 10 flight attendants, 4 pilots on board the United Airlines plane flying from San Francisco to Osaka. The plane was forced to make an emergency landing. In March, a Boeing 787 plane operated by LATAM Airlines suddenly dropped mid-air. 13 had to be rushed to the hospital after the plane made an emergency landing. And later that month, a cabin panel fell off a Boeing plane. There were 139 passengers on board. So far, luck has been favoring passengers on board Boeing's Scarecraft. But what's the guarantee that streak will continue unbroken. Things have been turbulent for Boeing since 2018-19. That's when two back-to-back crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX jets killed 346 people. All MAX jets were grounded globally. They managed to take off again after 18 long months, but nothing really changed on the ground. Let's now shift our focus to South Africa. What's happening there? It has proposed a controversial tourism plan that could threaten the very thing it aims to protect, the wildlife, rhinos in particular. South Africa, you see, is proposing allowing tourists to use rhino horn powder within its borders for its claimed medicinal effects. It is part of a wider strategy designed to get more economic value from the country's rich wildlife. It is a part of its 10-year National Biodiversity Economy Strategy. Another goal of this plan is to enable the primarily black communities to benefit economically. The goal is to bring financial benefits for black communities as they have historically been excluded from the white-dominated wildlife and conservation industry. South Africa's Environment Minister Barbara Creecy told news outlet Financial Times that the proposals were a way of ensuring that people in rural areas have an incentive for conservation. The logic is this: if the poorer sections of society, those who live around game reserves, were excluded, they would resort to land invasions and poaching. South Africa's plan to boost its economy and help the local community is praiseworthy, but we cannot help but ask a very pertinent question. Are we forgetting something very important in all of this? That rhinos are an endangered species. Is it really okay to sell rhino horn powder to help the economy if it involves endangered animals? Wildlife conservation experts have flagged this as well. They say that this approach to conservation looks interesting on paper, but that may not translate into workable solutions. You see, South Africa is home to roughly 80% of the world's wild rhinos, and this includes black rhinos, classified as critically endangered. They say at least 450 rhinos were poached last year. But they already know that. The South African government's plan acknowledges the international support for a ban on trade of rhino horn. Still, it suggests that South Africa explore innovative approaches when it comes to domestic trade. The strategy document, in fact, includes allowing initiatives like health clinics to administer traditional remedies using rhino horn for health tourists from the Far East. The controversial plan also suggests ivory carving being done locally for local sale and export for personal use. This plan has been approved by South Africa's cabinet, but is out for public consultation and prior to its implementation. Naturally, South Africans are divided on this. After all, do we have solid proof that rhino horn powder actually helps with health issues? You see, there is a big contradiction here between South Africa's position that rhino horn had no medicinal properties and its proposal to market it for medical tourism. Rhino horn is made of keratin, the same protein that helps form human hair, nails, skin. But in traditional Chinese medicine, it is believed to be a cure for fevers and snake bites. More recently, it has even been proposed as treatment for some forms of cancer. Since there is no proof of its medical benefits, really, critics have called South Africa's plan a crude form of extractive conservation. The proposed move to sell powdered rhino horn is highly controversial, especially given the rampant poaching and hunting that already threatens rhino populations. Further, legalizing the sale of rhino horn powder could potentially increase demand, as it could be seen as a legitimization of its use. This could also encourage more poaching in order to meet the demand, further endangering rhino populations. And let's not forget, it also undermines conservation efforts. South Africa and other countries have been investing significant resources into conservation efforts to protect rhinos from poaching. Legalizing the sale of rhino horn powder could undermine these efforts by sending mixed messages about the value of rhino conservation. Perhaps instead of pursuing a strategy that involves selling rhino horn powder, there should be more effective and sustainable conservation strategies, plans that prioritize protection of rhino populations and their habitats without resorting to commercial exploitation. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gampir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered